Hey guys, tonight we step into Alexandria, a city that exhales light the way the sea exhales mist. The harbor sighs at dusk, lanterns bloom one by one, and the Pharaoh's lighthouse rises like a pale column of fire, teaching ships the shape of safety. You walk slowly, sandals against warm stone, while the tide nudges your back like a guide with invisible hands. Mainstream histories begin this night with precision. Cleopatra, last of the Ptolemies, rules not as a wife or ornament, but as pharaoh in her own right. Greek in blood, Egyptian in crown. She speaks in tongues like a musician plucking strings. Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic. Perhaps more. Rome grows restless and hungry. Alliances must be courted. Grain must flow. So tonight, a banquet. Envoys expected. The palaces will not sleep, but the path you take is more omen than road. Invitations are not written on ivory tablets alone. They are whispered in reeds along the canopic way, breathed into the Nile that widens its shoulders for ships laden with wine. Ahead, they say, a veil waits, so fine that lamps wear it like perfume. Those who pass beneath may eat, drink, pretend the world is ordinary. But those who notice the veil step into another country altogether. The royal quarter rises like a throne the city built for its mistress, and then learned to kneel before. Guards stand with faces of iron cooled too fast, spears angled so moonlight drips from their tips. You cross into an outer court. Water murmurs in long pools. Papyrus fronds shiver where the wind plays. Slaves move in pairs, mirrors of each other. Left hands carry oil, right hands carry fire. Every torch, a small sun. Every flame, a pupil widening at your approach. Her name threads the air, without being spoken. You see it in details. Jars sealed with wax stamped in her cartouche. Lotus wreaths stacked like prophecy. Carpets unfurled, direction bent toward her chair. Historians still argue. Was her beauty enough to unmake Rome's iron men? Or was the true magnet her glamour of power? The way she set a room like a trap you longed to fall into. Roman pens, sharpened with spite, called her sorceress. Others, dulled with reluctance, conceded she knew statecraft as sailors know currents, not by maps but by tug. A herald meets you beneath a painted arch. He does not ask your name. He only listens to your breath, how it catches when strings are plucked somewhere inside. Walk softly, he murmurs. The night is already listening. And the floor obeys. Inlaid wood gleams, oiled to mirror your steps. Your reflection walks beside you, a darker you, who already knows where corridors bend. The corridor narrows, its breath held too long. Lamps here burn inside alabaster shells, their light turned to milk, not fire. Walls painted with reeds and ibis in flight. Gold leaf clings to their wings, the way afternoon clings to memory. Your steps soften, not from fear but from awe. Alexandria is a city built on crossroads, Greek colonnades casting Egyptian shadows. Hebrew merchants bargaining in Greek, then praying in Hebrew. Scholars arguing in the library, while fishermen argue with the sea. Cleopatra, daughter of this mixture, crown of its translation. If she hosts a feast tonight, the honored guest is not a man, but possibility. Servants glide past in pairs, trays balanced with sweets still steaming. The scent of cinnamon and hot sugar drifts like a rumor seeking an ear. To the left, a doorway open just enough. Silver hammered into plates. Spirals of candied dates. Figs torn slightly, their blush exposed. Pomegranates split. Seeds gleaming like rubies learning to breathe. The fruit does not beg hunger. It waits, certain of the hands that will reach. Fringe stories surface here. Conspirators in silk. They say Cleopatra commanded a priest of Hathor to bless these thresholds with white cow's milk. So every door would taste of sweetness, and every temper of strangers would bend. Others whisper a scribe crouched beneath a table, scratching ink by lamplight, counting which guests approached her couch without flinching. Still others claim a thin thread of gold was strung across the entrance at knee height. Invisible. So the careless stumbled, the watchful stepped over. A test without blood. a trap without teeth. Historians scoff, but as you near the next arch, your knee lifts of its own accord. A hand emerges from behind a screen, slim, ringless, the color of warmed clay. It parts a gauze curtain. Beyond, the air cools. Milk-white light deepens shadows. The silence is thick enough to drink. Scholars still quarrel about nights like this. Were Cleopatra's banquets only performances of wealth, gold spilled to dazzle allies, frighten enemies who measured threat by excess, or were they subtler plays, a theatre not of coin, but of control? Every chair a syllable, every gesture a word, a sentence only she could read. You pause. The veils strung between columns tremble like skin. The night refuses to decide. The hall bends, and suddenly opens. A second court, hidden inside the palace, like a thought tucked inside a prayer. Water runs in straight lines, scribe perfect. Small glass lamps float upon the pool. Their flames flicker, but never drown. They blink like slow stars, trapped under a roof. You linger at the edge. The night grows heavy, leaning against your shoulder. A breeze slides through carrying the scent of blue lotus. It slips under armor, finds the place men guard without knowing how. This garden whispers of contradiction. Rome builds walls. Egypt builds gardens. One imprisons, the other seduces. Here, seduction wins. Scholars divide again. Some argue these nights were simple distraction, banquets designed to bleed coin, keep rivals dazzled and dull. Others insist the queen spun her halls into script, every torch, every cushion a mark of punctuation. To sit at her table was to read her grammar of power. You wander among lamps. Each flame cups itself, obedient. Each reflection glides across water, doubling the number of stars. Slaves appear again, not pairs this time, but trios. The first holds silver, the second holds spice. The third, a veil of smoke in an open jar. Together they create the illusion of a scent walking by itself. Fringe accounts intrude. That Cleopatra kept bees not only for honey but for prophecy. That the wax sealing her jars was mixed with ash of burned papyrus, so words could flavor wine. That dancers were trained to walk so slowly, their anklets struck only every third beat of music. A rhythm foreign enough to unsettle Roman ears. Whether true or not, the effect lingers. You walk slower now, as though time itself has been thinned. The lamps seem farther apart, the air denser, your own heartbeat becomes percussion in the feast's overture. And ahead, another doorway waits, taller than memory, carved with vines that coil even in stillness. Its hinges invisible, wood trained to pretend it opens itself. Two eunuchs guard the threshold, linen the color of dusk. Neither bends his eyes. Around each neck, a cord bearing a key, one bronze, one electrum. They bow together, not to you, but to the night itself, and together they unlock the dark. The doors yield, not with creak or groan, but with the hush of fabric pulled gently apart, and the banquet breathes. Not noise, no. The music is too disciplined for chaos. It arrives as density, a shawl of sound across your shoulders. Flutes sigh into your ear. A drum keeps a pulse you didn't know your chest was hiding. Strings loosen like silk released from a clenched hand. The air is cooler, though the lamps are many. Their flames are trained to obedience. Your eyes travel the length of the room. It coils like a sentence, clauses bending, each chair a word. And there, at the far horizon of grammar, rests Cleopatra. She is not yet the subject. She is punctuation. A pause at the end of a long thought. Linen crosses her like an unfinished sentence. Gold tests restraint on her wrists. Her hair is a river, braided so deliberately the current hides. She leans toward someone you cannot see, but her voice drifts, not toward them, but toward you, as though your name were a kind of audience. Around her, guests recline. Romans, careful as cats near water. Greeks, pretending they invented comfort. Egyptians, certain the gods are amused. Each glances at you, not with suspicion, but as if your presence were inevitable. A lamp, a breath, a fact. Historians scribble arguments here too. Was Cleopatra adored or endured? Did Romans truly fall into her snare, or did they step willingly, knowing the trap was softer than steel, easier than war? Cicero's ink dripped with scorn. Plutarch's pen trembled with fascination. The debate endures. Beauty or power? Sorcery or statecraft? Perhaps both, perhaps neither. Fringe tales push closer, that beneath the couches ran a narrow channel of water, and that perfumes were poured into it, drifting like messages to those who could read scent, that a cup placed nearest the queen's couch was etched with a hidden map of the Nile, only visible by lamplight and wine spill, that her sandals were studded with magnets, so thin iron threads in the carpet guided her steps, making each movement seem like choreography preordained. True? False? The record does not decide, but the lamps shiver as though the story itself exhaled. You feel the veil now, not cloth, but pressure. The thin place in the air where meaning waits before revealing itself. To cross it is to surrender. To sit is to be written. You cross the threshold. The veil touches you not on skin, but deeper. Like breath pressed against thought, a servant kneels, offers water in a silver basin. Lotus petals float, soft, bruised, fragrant. You dip your hands. The chill pulls you further awake, even as the night tries to lull. The couches are arranged in gentle curves, not straight lines. No guest faces another directly. Instead, sight bends, always toward the queen. Every posture, every gesture, ripples out from her like tides from a hidden moon. Musicians linger near columns. Their notes drip, slow and deliberate. No crescendo, no flourish. Just a thread of sound, woven tight enough to bind, loose enough to breathe. Food arrives in waves. Bowls of lentils perfumed with cumin. Roast duck slick with honey. Fish wrapped in lotus leaves. And wine, always wine. Dark, sweet, thick enough to leave memory on the tongue. Historians agree. Cleopatra's banquets were marvels of abundance, but they disagree on purpose. Were they diplomacy in disguise, or worship masquerading as appetite? Some argue the queen fed Rome's envoys not with food, but with theatre, each bite a line of persuasion, each cup a treaty uncorked. Others whisper she sought only survival, a queen weaving illusion, while Rome sharpened knives outside her door. Fringe tales color the feast with stranger hues, that dancers veiled in gold silk carried mirrors, reflecting lamplight, so her face glowed from every angle. That a Nubian priestess sang beneath the floor, her voice rising through hollow channels like prophecy. That figs served near midnight were dusted with crushed pearls, their grit meant to remind men of deserts waiting beyond Alexandria's fragile wealth. You take your seat. Cushions sink softly, swallowing sound. The lamp nearest you leans its flame, curious. The banquet does not begin with words. It begins with watching. Every eye, a wick, every glance, a match. Cleopatra moves at last, not rising, not rushing, only her hand lifting a cup, and the hall exhales as though it has been holding its breath all night. Her cup rises, gold rim catching firelight. The liquid within glows darker than ruby, heavier than blood. She tilts it, just enough for every guest to see the surface tremble. Then she drinks. The hall follows. A ripple of motion, cups lifted like waves. Wine mouths the room, binding strangers together, dissolving suspicion in sweetness. But what do the scrolls say? Plutarch writes of Cleopatra's extravagance, boats with purple sails, carpets of silver thread. Cicero sneers, calls her reckless, her banquets gaudy spectacles of waste. And yet, others whisper admiration, that her feasts were languages no embassy could refuse, not mere indulgence, but grammar spoken in grapes and honey. Servants appear, silent as wind. They pour perfumes over small bronze dishes. The smoke curls upward. A second kind of music. Frankincense for clarity, myrrh for devotion, blue lotus to quiet the mind, to soften the body's guard. Fringe stories claim stranger ingredients, that beneath the sweetness lay powders of crushed emerald, believed to sharpen sight beyond mortal things. That threads of saffron inked in the shapes of constellations were floated atop soups, so each guest swallowed a star. That Cleopatra herself drank wine steeped in rose quartz, convinced the stone lent charm to every word that passed her lips. You notice the rhythm. No plate arrives without pause. Every course, food, then fragrance, then music. Not one sense overwhelmed, but all senses woven. Cleopatra speaks at last, not loudly. Her voice is the smallest sound in the hall, but every ear tilts toward it, helpless. She speaks in Greek first, then Egyptian. Rome listens. Even silence bends toward her tongue. The debate endures. Did she beguile? Or did men beguile themselves, grateful to be allowed near her fire? The truth hides in shadows, beneath couches, inside goblets. But the night continues, neither hurried nor slow. And you feel the veil again. Not cloth, not smoke, but the hush that falls before a revelation. It waits, and you are already within it. The queen reclines, yet nothing about her is idle. Every shift of linen, every tilt of wrist is calculated to seem effortless. Envoys murmur among themselves. Romans with eyes like iron. Greeks with smirks rehearsed for centuries. Egyptians, quiet, patient, amused. One Roman lifts his cup too quickly. Wine spills onto his sleeve. A servant appears, already waiting. Cloth clean and warm, pressed against the stain. Not a second lost, even mistakes rehearsed. Historians argue here as well. Did Cleopatra choreograph every moment? Or did she simply trust her court to move as extensions of her will? Some say she was genius of improvisation. Others insist she rehearsed feasts as generals rehearse war. A banquet not of chance, but of strategy. Fringe tales intrude. That beneath the marble floor, musicians hidden in tunnels echoed each note above, doubling the harmony, creating the illusion that the air itself could sing. That courtiers were instructed to laugh in sequence, so mirth traveled like a candle passed hand to hand. That the lamps were trimmed with oil drawn from a single jar, sealed decades before her birth, as though destiny itself had been uncorked tonight. The meal swells. Duck glazed in honey, goat roasted with garlic and coriander, bread soft as clouds, torn by hand, dipped into bowls of lentil stew. But it is not the food that feeds. It is the silence between words. The way Cleopatra listens, head tilted, eyes narrowed, smile small, but impossible to read. Her silence louder than speeches. The veil presses closer, a thinness in the air, a shimmer of meaning. It waits, like a curtain that knows the play is about to begin. The first toast ends, but the true feaster begins only now. Musicians lower their notes. A hush drapes the room. Cleopatra leans forward, her gaze sweeping the couches, touching each guest like a fingertip upon glass. She speaks of Nile floods, of grain heavy as gold, of ships that can feed Rome's hunger, if Rome will let Egypt breathe. Her words are not simple offerings. They are barbed honey, sweet enough to soothe, sharp enough to warn. Historians still cannot agree. Was this night diplomacy draped in silk, or seduction veiled as statecraft? Did envoys taste negotiation, or did they taste only her? One scroll claims she spoke Latin flawlessly. Another insists she refused, demanding they bend instead to Greek. Still others whisper that she mixed tongues mid-sentence, so no man could be sure where language ended and lure began. Fringe tales stretch further, that each envoy's couch was scented differently, jasmine for trust, myrrh for devotion, cedar for dominance. That the wine cups were inscribed on the inside with sigils of protection, seen only as the last sip vanished. That Cleopatra herself wore a vial of poison around her neck, not to use on enemies, but to remind them she could choose her own exit, never theirs. The hall breathes as one, a Roman coughs, a Greek laughs too quickly, an Egyptian servant bows, his silence louder than both. You sit, watching. The lamps ripple as though wind has entered, but the air is still. The veil is shifting again, thinner, sharper, meaning gathers like stormlight before release. The banquet deepens, not louder and but heavier, Music becomes background, heartbeat of the hall. Conversation turns to whispers. Eyes carry more than tongues. A tray appears, silver wide as a shield. Upon it, figs split open, their flesh jeweled with seeds. Honey drips in threads, golden spiderwebs across the fruit. Cleopatra does not eat first. She watches. Envoys hesitate, then obey. Some historians record these nights as theatre of abundance. Others say no, it was theatre of restraint. That the queen herself touched food rarely, as though appetite was something she owned but need not display. Her hunger was power, not bread. Fringe tales add darker spices. That one fig was hollowed and filled with pearl dust, meant to test which Roman would boast of its taste. That the honey carried saffron tinctured with dream root, making guests drowsy, more pliable. That musicians plucked their strings not to entertain, but to measure the breath of those listening, adjusting rhythm to heartbeats they could not see. You taste nothing. And yet, flavor lingers in the air, sweetness carried by smoke, salt of the sea locked in memory. Cleopatra raises her hand. The hall falls still. Her voice again, smooth as poured oil, sharp as bronze when she wishes. She speaks of Rome's hunger for Egypt's grain, not as plea, not as surrender, but as reminder. The Nile feeds not only her people, it feeds the empire that pretends to own the world. A Roman shifts uneasy, a Greek smiles too wide, an Egyptian priest nods, slow and deliberate. The veil hovers, closer, closer. Not cloth, not smoke, but the edge of a truth no scroll ever wrote. You feel it now, as if the room itself were waiting for your answer. The next course arrives, not food and but spectacle. Dancers enter, veiled in silk the color of dusk. They move slowly, so slowly the anklets chime only every third step. A rhythm alien to Roman ears, familiar only to the Nile. Their veils catch lamplight, scatter it across walls. For a moment the whole hall shimmers, as though everyone sits inside a single jewel. Historians record little of this. They prefer numbers, ships, coins, treaties. But silence in the scrolls does not mean silence in the night. What was unrecorded was perhaps most important. Fringe stories bloom here. That Cleopatra instructed the dancers to move like stars, so envoys felt the ceiling was sky and time itself had bent. That beneath each veil hid not faces but mirrors, so every man saw his own longing returned. That one dancer carried no anklets at all. Her silence meant to unsettle, to remind guests that absence too is part of music. Cleopatra does not clap, she does not praise, she only watches. Her gaze holds the dancers, and through them holds the room. The wine deepens, voices slur, laughter ripens. Romans lean back, pretending ease. Greeks bargain in glances. Egyptians smile like priests who already know the outcome. Cleopatra lifts her hand. The dancers halt, as if strings cut. The room inhales. The veil shivers. Meaning draws nearer, sharp as a blade kissed in shadow. Scholars still argue, did Cleopatra use her banquets to charm or to terrify? To remind Rome that Egypt's wealth could drown or feed? Or to remind herself that survival was theatre, and theatre demanded audience? No one answers, but the silence left behind is its own speech. The night leans deeper. Oil lamps burn lower, their flames smaller, steadier. Music softens until it feels like memory. A servant approaches with a silver tray. Upon it, 2 cups, darker than shadow. They are placed near the Romans, no word spoken, only weight, only choice. Historians scribble theories. Were these gestures deliberate tests or accidents preserved by rumor? Did Cleopatra weigh loyalty in wine or in silence? One account insists she mixed pearls into vinegar, drank the dissolved jewel before all eyes, a display of wealth so reckless it became power. Others doubt, calling it fantasy, a Roman invention to slander her. And yet, the story endures, because sometimes myth is the only truth a night will allow. Fringe tales multiply. That the cups carried etchings of constellations, and the Romans argued over which star was theirs. That one vessel was warmed, the other chilled, so the drinker felt either fire or ice slide down his throat. That Cleopatra herself never touched wine, poured by another hand, for she trusted no one with endings. The queen reclines, her eyes half-lidded. She does not move, yet the hall bends toward her. Words coil in corners, hushed. Every gesture around her is a translation. A nod becomes treaty. A sip becomes surrender. You sit within it. The veil is almost transparent now. Each breath you take feels borrowed, as if the air belonged first to her, then to you. The night waits, and still she has not revealed its purpose. The hall exhales again. Lamps sputter once set, then steady. The dancers vanish beyond the veils. Only the queen remains. Stillness shaped into flesh. She begins to speak once more, not with the flourish of orators, but with pauses. Long enough that silence answers first. She speaks of the Nile's gift, grain heavy enough to tip the balance of Rome itself, of ships waiting in harbors, not yet claimed, not yet promised, of alliances that could make or unmake empires. Historians note her skill here. No direct threats, no open bargains, only invitations, woven like silk threads across the room. Rome must lean forward to catch them. Greece must pretend not to envy. Egyptians and smile like priests who already know the ending. But fringe accounts wander darker. That each envoy's chair was built hollow, with reeds stuffed inside to murmur when the sitter shifted. A reminder of the river's constant voice. That incense hidden in wall vents carried faint mandrake, enough to loosen tongues, enough to blur suspicion. That Cleopatra's bracelets were polished obsidian, so when she raised her hand, envoys glimpsed their own faces in shadow. Wine flows again, not in torrents but in careful measures, every cup a comma, every refill a new clause. The sentence, long, deliberate, unfinished. Cleopatra listens more than she speaks, and yet the silence around her is more eloquent than speeches. Every envoy feels it, the strange weight of being heard too closely, as though their words, once spoken, would never belong to them again. The veil draws thinner. You sense its shimmer now, almost visible. It waits, patient, like the pause before the last page is turned. The banquet drifts toward midnight. Outside, Alexandria sighs, waves licking stone, lanterns dimming one by one along the harbor. Inside, the lamps burn steady, though their oil runs thin. Shadows lengthen, fold across the marble like silk. A tray arrives again, not food, not wine, but scrolls. Sealed in wax, stamped with her cartouche. Cleopatra does not open them. She lets the envoys see and wonder. Historians puzzle at this detail. Were these scrolls true treaties, or empty skins designed only to weigh the room? Some say she enjoyed the theater of secrecy more than the signing of ink. Others argue the opposite, that the silence of unopened words was more binding than any signature. Fringe tales embroider stranger truths, that the scrolls contained not words but perfumes, each wax seal hiding a fragrance meant for one guest alone. That one scroll held only a mirror shard, so the envoy who broke it found his own eye staring back. That a Roman, too bold, reached for a scroll without leave, and the lamps flickered until his hand froze mid-air. The queen lifts her gaze, not at the scrolls, at the guests, one by one. Her eyes linger just long enough to remind them that they are already written. The music shifts again. Not flutes now, but harp strings plucked slow. Each note trembles, falls into the silence like water dripping in caverns. The veil is almost gone. So thin it seems the air itself is fabric. You sense the night pressing closer, its purpose almost ready to speak. The night tilts. Wine is nearly gone. The lamps bend low, their flames thin as whispers. Cleopatra rises, not sudden, but the room trembles as if a storm stood. She does not shout. Her voice falls soft, but every guest leans forward, straining, afraid to miss a syllable. She speaks of empire, of Rome's hunger, of Egypt's gift, grain, wine, beauty, survival. Her hand hovers above the scrolls, not opening, not closing, simply waiting. Historians argue endlessly about this moment. Was she offering alliance, or warning of famine should Rome turn against her? Was it plea or threat? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Fringe stories burn hotter. That she carried poison in a ring ready to tip the balance with one drop. That she wore a serpent-shaped amulet, its eyes two tiny emeralds glowing when Rome's name was spoken. That a shadow moved across the ceiling, not cast by any lamp, a reminder that Egypt's gods had not abandoned her. The Romans sit stiff, their faces stone, their fingers tight around empty cups. The Greek smirks but uneasily. The Egyptians watch like statues waiting for the night to declare itself. Cleopatra lowers her hand. The scrolls remain sealed, the lamp steady. The silence becomes thunder. The veil is paper thin now. One breath more, and it will tear. The hall holds its breath. Every flame, still. Every gaze, waiting. Cleopatra stands. Her linen slides like water. Her bracelets chime once, then fall silent. She walks slowly. Each step deliberate. Each pause heavier than words. The scrolls remain sealed. She does not touch them. Instead, she lifts her cup, empty. The hall stirs. A Roman shifts. A Greek clears his throat. An Egyptian smiles, faint, knowing. Cleopatra tilts the cup. Invisible wine pours Amas into silence. A toast without liquid. A treaty without ink. A promise without oath. Historians claw at this moment. Did she bind Rome with nothing more than gesture? Did she remind them that Egypt gave more than grain? Egypt gave meaning. Some say the envoys agreed that night, not with words, but with silence. Fringe tales whisper bolder. That the empty cup was lined with dust of crushed pearl, proof that even nothing could be treasure. That Rome's men drank shadows that night and dreamed of her for years after. That the veil itself tore, but only for those who dared to look. Cleopatra lowers her hand. The banquet ends without ending. The guests rise, not triumphant, not defeated, but altered. The queen returns to her couch, eyes closed, smile unreadable. The veil is gone. You are inside it now, and you understand. Her power was never only beauty, never only grain. It was this, the grammar of silence, the theater of shadows, the banquet no scroll can fully hold. The night drifts into quiet. The lamps dim, their flames bowing low, like tired eyelids surrendering. You walk again through corridors once bright, now soft, their colors fading into dream. The alabaster lamps no longer shine like milk. They glow like memory. Every footstep, gentler, every breath, slower. The city beyond the palace sighs in its sleep. The harbor hums. The pharaoh's lighthouse still burns, a steady pulse against the endless sea. But its fire feels smaller now, further away. You carry the banquet within you, the taste of honey, the whisper of smoke, the silence that spoke louder than words. Cleopatra's gaze lingers, not in sight, but in the rhythm of your own breath. You lie down in thought, pillows of air beneath your head. The banquet dissolves into haze. The envoys vanish. The music thins to a single note, then fades. Only the night remains, and it holds you gently like silk, like water, like rest. The story ends, but your dreams continue, and in them, the veil waits, soft, patient, ready to part once more. Sweet dreams.